I'll tell you what, it's been really hard to be an Assassin's Creed fan for the last few years. Just every time Ubisoft has the chance to like surprise us and excite us, they do the, what's the word? Opposite. In the last few years, it just seems like Ubisoft doesn't know what to do with the franchise. They don't know what their fans really want. They want the game to be a massive open world exploration-based adventure RPG like The Witcher 3. They also want it to be always online so that it prints money for them perpetually like GTA Online has for Rockstar. And really at its core, it just seems like a franchise that doesn't really know what it wants to be. So it's trying to be everything all at once. And we've heard some interesting news in the last few months that Ubisoft is trying a new approach with the Assassin's Creed franchise, one that might make things a little bit better, and some leaks that dropped just about an hour ago before filming this could possibly reaffirm that perception, that things are changing, maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. That's what we're here to talk about. For the record, there's nothing in these leaks that I would classify as spoilers or anything, so don't stress about that. It's basically just what the overarching idea for the games will be, and that's about it, with some rough timelines tossed in there. But that's really it. That's all these leaks are. It tells us what Ubisoft is trying to do with the franchise over the next decade or so, and from this information you can make your own conclusions as to whether or not this is good news or bad news. Honestly, I'm just exhausted at this point, so I don't know what to make of it. But enough of the filibustering, I'm gonna get right into it. I don't have a sponsor or anything to talk your ear off about, so all I will ask is that if you enjoy this content, you of course subscribe. The stats I have say roughly 80% of you guys are not subscribed, so what are you doing? You like the videos, you watch them, just subscribe. It's a button, it doesn't hurt anything. But the other thing is that I am a full-time streamer as well over on Luke Stevens Live right here. Just look up Luke Stevens Live in the search bar or follow the links in the description and the pinned comment and everything. Come over, say hi. I stream whenever these videos go up, so I'll be live when you see this video most likely, so just come over, say hi. I would love to see you. We also post stream highlights, clips, pretty much any video I make for the main channel that just doesn't end up fitting or that I chicken out of posting goes up over there. So there's a ton of extra content. If you like this stuff, you'll definitely like the stuff over there. But enough blabbering. Let's just get into it. Let's talk about it. So the information that just dropped today comes from Tom Henderson over at Insider Gaming. And basically these guys have had a track record recently of putting out information that's relatively accurate about Ubisoft. Sometimes I disagree about their, let's just say, interpretation of the statements they get from their sources, but that's a matter for another day. What I will say is that these are rumblings that have gone around for a little while. Nothing's confirmed. This is all just rumors and sort of speculation to a certain extent, but it jives with everything else that we've seen previously, and so I would consider this more likely than not. To sum it all up, basically Ubisoft is going all in. What that means is that they have roughly 6 different games planned for Assassin's Creed going right now. Some in the early stages of development and some in the very late stages starting to get ready, such as with Assassin's Creed Mirage, which allegedly is coming middle to late this year, even though we haven't seen anything about it. The whole thing is really, really weird. That's, again, a topic for another video, but Jesus, that game is weird. For one, they say that a sequel to the, as of right now, unannounced VR Assassin's Creed game that they're looking to announce sometime around E3, it's already being discussed and potentially entering development relatively soon. I guess they just anticipate this first VR game to be really successful, so they're jumping on a second one. And I'll be real, a VR Assassin's Creed game kind of sounds really cool with social stealth elements being implemented. You could have free climbing tied to the VR headset. That could be awesome. There's a lot of potential there, and I think that actually could be a winner if I'm being real. I would love more VR games to play. I have an Oculus Quest 2, and so far that thing's been pretty freaking phenomenal, but I personally can't justify spending a ton more money on higher end equipment or different equipment just because there haven't been a lot of games to captivate me. It seems like most of the hype around VR was a few years ago, and now everything is just trailing off. But who knows? This could kickstart some new third-party support for VR and could be awesome. So I'll be keeping an eye on this. They also say that Ubisoft Sofia, known for co-developing Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation and Assassin's Creed Rogue, has pitched a project codenamed Nebula, an Assassin's Creed title that will have 3 different settings: India, the Aztec Empire, and the Mediterranean. What exactly this means, I have no idea. Is this going to be one protagonist in 3 different areas? Is this going to be 3 different protagonists? Is this going to be like multiple phases of a story through the centuries? I don't know, but it seems extremely ambitious if they're talking about having India, which could easily host its own game full stop, the Aztec Empire, which also could easily host its own game without any trouble, and the Mediterranean setting, which is something we've seen before, of course, with Assassin's Creed Odyssey and, you know, all of those games. But either way, very, very interesting. Ubisoft Chengdu has pitched Project Raid, which is a free-to-play 4-player cooperative title that will be PvE. It's believed that the title's characters will be a collection of those from the Assassin's Creed universe. So basically, you can just play as like Connor from Assassin's Creed 3 fighting or maybe stealth assassinating another player who's playing as maybe Jacob Fry from Assassin's Creed Syndicate or something. And so they're kind of tossing it all into one big salad that would be an Assassin's Creed PvE game. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I mean, it's a 4-player co-op, very similar, at least in what this makes me think of, to the missions we had in Assassin's Creed Unity. If you never played multiplayer in Assassin's Creed Unity, it's actually kind of fire. I'm going to be real. It's way better than I thought it would be, but this could be a return to form for that type of cooperative gameplay. And honestly, I'd be very, very intrigued to see what that's like. And perhaps the one that's most interesting to me is Ubisoft Annecy's project, known for developing the multiplayer portion of games like Assassin's Creed and Splinter Cell, as well as co-developing The Division 2 with Massive Entertainment. They've pitched Project Echoes, which has been described as a multiplayer title that uses Ubisoft's scalar technology. Let me explain why this is interesting. If you've never heard of it, basically Ubisoft Scalar's tech is supposed to put all of the world building, all of the processing for an open world game into the cloud, effectively. So whether or not the game is small in scope or huge in scope, the server infrastructure that Ubisoft will be building out is going to handle all of the minutia of running it. In effect, what this would allow them to do is, say, for a Star Wars game, which they're working on, they could have all of the planets hosted within the cloud, so any sort of AI simulation, any sort of dynamic processing to figure out, okay, well, what is the weather going to be like on the planet? What is this doing? Are the planets moving this way? You know, all of that stuff can be handled in the cloud, so you playing the game on your console or on your PC, you don't have to deal with that heavy load of handling all of that stuff. It basically offloads some passive, slower, less urgent calculations into the cloud so the servers handle it. And this, according to Ubisoft, when they announced this last year, this, they say, is going to enable them to create literal galaxy-sized open world, or open galaxy, I guess, sized games where they can actively change stuff, like having a volcano erupt or changing the map topography or any of these other things without so much as suffering from server disconnections. This would totally change how open world games are built and work. Very similar to what Star Citizen's devs have been doing with the fractal system for servers, where you can have perpetually active entities within the game. So like you drop a bottle in the middle of nowhere in Star Citizen, you can come back to that spot on that planet in the galaxy that you're exploring 5 years from now, and so long as nobody's picked it up or moved it, it will still be there. Stuff like that is going to be possible with this tech, and allegedly this upcoming Assassin's Creed game that they're thinking of working on and that they've pitched and allegedly started pre-planning on would be using this tech. It's still many, many years out, but it's still pretty cool. As for what this means for Assassin's Creed, the only thing I can really think of doing is to just have an Assassin's Creed game that literally spans an entire continent with whole cities that are sort of dynamically generated, or perhaps that are handcrafted but are dynamically maintained in terms of massive populations of thousands and thousands of people. Think of what they did with Watch Dogs Legion, with every single character being playable and having a different work schedule and routine. They could put that into an Assassin's Creed game, into a massive world that is larger than anything you've ever experienced before, that isn't just procedurally generated, and they could have that live and breathe run through the server infrastructure that they've set up on the back end. It's extremely ambitious, but still very cool. To be clear, I don't think that this is like, oh, well, this is a cool idea, therefore it will be successful. No, Ubisoft has a lot of other problems going on that complicate this discussion, which I'm going to touch on in just a moment, but nonetheless, the idea is interesting. So as of right now, we have a list of Assassin's Creed games that are coming. We have Assassin's Creed Mirage. This is set in Baghdad. We have Assassin's Creed Project Red, which is the Japanese setting game. We have Assassin's Creed Project Hexe, which is set in Central Europe during witch trials. Seems really interesting, a little more horror oriented, but nonetheless, very, very intriguing. We also have Assassin's Creed Project Jade, which was the mobile game that leaked a little while ago. I can't show it here, otherwise this video will get taken down, but if you look it up, you can find the gameplay footage of it. And honestly, it seems really interesting. It's set in China, and what they showed in that leak was actually quite impressive for being a mobile game. If that actually was running on mobile devices, it's extremely, extremely impressive. So that's going to be one to keep an eye on for sure. There's Assassin's Creed Invictus, which is a multiplayer coming down the pike, and then the aforementioned VR title, which will probably be announced sometime around E3. Tack on to that, this Assassin's Creed project from Ubisoft Sofia that's set in India, the Aztec Empire, and the Mediterranean, Ubisoft Chengdu's project for the 4-player co-op game, and then Ubisoft Annecy's project for a massive, crazy, large-scale Assassin's Creed game, which probably we won't be seeing until the late 2020s, if we ever see it at all. But why am I not, like, super jubilant over all of this? Like, they seem to be working on a lot. Isn't this cause for celebration? Well, it's complicated. For this, we're breaking out the iPad, okay? Are you ready? Buckle up. So previous to this, what Ubisoft has tried to do is they've taken little bubbles of players. You might have a player that's particularly interested in, let's say, multiplayer. And then we have players, let's say, that are really interested in stealth. That's what they mostly are interested in when they play Assassin's Creed games. And then we have players over here that really like, let's just say, I don't know, parkour is what they're passionate about, hardcore parkour. And then these people over here, let's say they're really interested in the Assassin's Creed story. They've been following it for a long time. They're passionate about that. And so we've got these different bubbles of groups that have different interests. What Ubisoft has been trying to do is, instead of appealing to each individual group, what they've done is they've gone in and actually tried to just capture all of these guys at the same time with the same game. So they just create this big old game that's meant to make everybody happy at the exact same time, and they call this Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
It'll never get old. But you see, the problem with doing something like this is that you don't actually make any of these people particularly happy. The story people are like, okay, well, now instead of getting a game that I was really, really happy about, only like 25% of the effort went towards making me happy and satisfied. Same with the parkour guys, they're just not too thrilled. Multiplayer guys are also not too thrilled because all of the focus has been spread such that nobody gets the game that they were hoping for. Everybody gets a slightly disappointing game, which they're like, okay, cool, but I would have really liked a game that just focused on the thing I wanted it to focus on. And honestly, I think Ubisoft executives probably saw this when Assassin's Creed Valhalla was played and went out to the public. They saw that while players were thankful for such a massive game, it was overwhelming, and a lot of people felt as though it was the jack of all trades, the master of none. It did a lot, but didn't do any of it particularly well. The story, really lackluster, even though there was a lot of it. The free climbing, it's there, but there was nothing interesting to free climb, so it's just kind of boring. The naval stuff really stripped out. It's still sort of there in some capacity, but compared to Assassin's Creed Odyssey, it's non-existent. Same with the stealth stuff. It's all sort of there, but none of it is done well. So now, instead of trying to make everybody happy with one massive game that takes 6 years to make and that's kind of lackluster in most regards, they're coming in, Ubisoft is saying, okay, well, we're going to take these multiplayer gamers and we're going to give them this green game. It's going to make them super, super happy. In this case, this is that game that's currently codenamed Invictus. So they're working on that. And then over here for the stealth gamers, they have another title coming called AC Mirage, which allegedly is coming sometime in the future, even though nobody has really seen it and they're still accepting pre-orders. That's a thing. And then for the parkour lovers, let's say this is the VR game. Let's just say, I don't know what they'll end up calling it, but that's the VR game for the parkour fans. They're trying to appeal to that group. And then for the story guys over here, they have these massive projects that are going to be crazy expansive and maybe have a really, really compelling story. I don't know. Let's just say this is the project from like the Annecy team. So you have this one over here to appeal to those people. So we have all of these different games that are targeted at different people trying to do different things. And that initially sounds awesome. Okay, Ubisoft, you've tried to be the master of all, and you just end up kind of being lackluster at everything you do. This might help. Sure. My problem with this is that while they stopped trying to make one massive game that just encompassed everything all at once, guess what all this is going to be contained within? Assassin's Creed Infinity. Apologies for my chicken scratch. And it's still under Ubisoft's helm. So even though they're going separate, even though they're each being made by different teams and they're technically being put into separate packages, most people's complaint is that Ubisoft, as a company, as a development, like giga company with thousands and thousands of developers within dozens of teams, their management is really bad at figuring out what players want and then delivering that in a clear, concise way. And instead, they have a general philosophy that more is more. And that just leads to games that feel bloated, that feel uninspired, that feel corporate, feel like they're designed by a committee, and it's just not very conducive to a high quality artistic environment. Even though there's phenomenal artists within Ubisoft, they are constantly pigeonholed by the lackluster leadership. And as far as we know, the leadership hasn't changed at all. The only thing they've done is they've set it so the teams now, instead of working on one massive game that has 6,000 people working on it, they have one game being made by 500 people that is smaller in scope, that can try to specialize in one thing. I'm very optimistic about it. I'm hopeful. I don't think that this is just like, okay, well, yeah, Ubisoft figured it out. We're good now. This is a big deal. They're trying to do something pretty different and pretty transformational as far as Ubisoft is concerned and as far as Assassin's Creed is concerned, but a lot of things have to go right for all of this to come together. And honestly, what it probably will feel like in 5 years' time, just being completely honest with you, is that they're just going to be milking this franchise for all it's worth. Because you have to remember, you're going to see annual releases roughly that are extremely different from each other. We might have, for this year, Assassin's Creed Mirage. Next year, we're going to get a multiplayer co-op game. Everybody's going to lose their minds. Oh my God, they made Assassin's Creed co-op. Oh God, it's the world's ending. Everything's horrible. And then the next year they come out and they have sort of a horror-inspired Assassin's Creed game. You're like, oh, this is an amazing change. And then the next year they have a massive mobile game launch. And I think it's going to actually lead to a lot of franchise fatigue, even if not all players are engaging with each and every release. Because to be clear, that's what Ubisoft is going for. They're anticipating that most players that are in each of these groups will stay in those groups. Maybe they'll leak out, maybe they'll try, like the multiplayer guys will go over and they'll try the stealth game a little bit, and then they'll go over here, and maybe the stealth guys will go and they'll try some of the story game, and we'll bounce around and there'll be a little bit of crossover. But the thing is, this little demonstration that Ubisoft is basing like their entire business model on for Assassin's Creed over the next decade isn't actually very accurate. What would be accurate is a Venn diagram where you have a bunch of circles that sort of overlap each other in varying degrees. And so here you have, again, maybe the story players, up here the multiplayer, and down here we have the stealth fans. So we have all these different demographics, but it all sort of overlaps. There are people who enjoy stealth that also like this little area right here, the parkour bits, and they also like some of the story. They like that too. And some of the parkour people, they like some multiplayer stuff. They'd like to play that with their friends. And maybe some people like the multiplayer parkour and the story, and they fit in right here. So it's not actually the case that you're going to just have one game that somebody's really happy with for that year, and then they're good for a year or two, and then they bounce back in whenever something else that applies to their niche appeals to them. Instead, what you're going to have is a lot of people that are trying to dip their toes into every single game that will start to get really exhausted, because franchise fatigue is a real problem for every franchise, for Call of Duty and for even Assassin's Creed. Everybody remembers just how in 2015 players were exhausted by Assassin's Creed. They needed a break, so they took 2016 off. They put out a kind of lame movie in 2016, and then in 2017 they came back with Assassin's Creed Origins that was a total transformational shift for the franchise. And now we've had Assassin's Creed Origins, and then we had Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and then we had Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which was at this point 2-3 years ago, and people are now ready for something else. But at the end of Valhalla, everybody was wiped out and exhausted from the franchise again, which is why they needed to take this break to figure out what they were going to do next. And that's why we're getting Assassin's Creed Mirage after all this time. But honestly, I would fully expect that over the next handful of years, as time goes by, we're going to get 5, 6, 7 Assassin's Creed games every 8 to 12 months. And everybody's probably going to be pretty sick of the franchise by the time Assassin's Creed Hexe and all of these other games come out in 2026, 27, 28, simply because Ubisoft is pretty desperate. We went through that recently, and they're relying on Assassin's Creed basically saving their multi-billion-dollar business. And so they're going to start throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and just frankly praying that something sticks. So while I would like to say that this is a return to like creative integrity and not just pumping stuff out for the sake of trying to do everything and get everybody to buy your game, I think that this is actually indicative of sort of the opposite of, I think, what they're trying to imply, which is that Ubisoft is extremely desperate. They need these games to be successful. They tried making one game that encompasses every package, and that didn't work too well. Player sentiment towards Assassin's Creed Valhalla has dropped pretty substantially. They just aren't sold on it. It's quantity over quality for sure. And so Ubisoft's trying to shift now, but it's just a different package for the same product. It's the same thing. Just instead of putting it all in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, they're just having a bunch of small teams that have only ever been in support roles, that haven't ever put out a game by themselves, and they're having them work on these massive projects, and then they're going to toss them out and hope that they can be successful. Just look at the different studios. Ubisoft Annecy, they developed multiplayer portions of Assassin's Creed games and Splinter Cell, and they co-developed The Division 2 with Massive. But Massive Entertainment was marked as the lead developers on that game. Ubisoft Chengdu, which my understanding, they've primarily been in a support role up until now, so they've never put out their own game. I could be wrong on that though. And Ubisoft Sofia, known for co-developing Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation and Rogue, pitched this game. Up until now, they've been doing a lot of support work on other games in various franchises. So again, these are all smaller support teams that are now being tasked with potentially entire major titles. And honestly, recently, that hasn't gone too well. You guys know that Ubisoft Singapore is in charge of Skull and Bones, and Skull and Bones has been in development hell for years and years and years. It's been delayed, what, like 6-7 times at this point? It's ridiculous. And that's just frankly what happens when you have a team that hasn't ever put out a product before, with problematic leadership and management trying to get something out the door to save a business that's drowning already because of lackluster leadership. And I think that all of this just reaffirms one of the major concerns Assassin's Creed fans have had for the last few years, which is that the management within Ubisoft is the real problem. And until they leave, it's just going to be more of the same. And honestly, this looks to be more of the same in a different package. I hope it ends up being awesome. I hope they end up blowing us away and these games end up amazing, because of course I would love more great games. It's like when people go, Luke, you just like hating on stuff. Like, no, I want more awesome games. I'm just not going to lie to myself or to you when something looks like ass. I'm just going to keep it 100, okay? I'm not going to hype it up for easy clicks. And honestly, when I see stuff like this, it just reaffirms for me one of my concerns for the franchise that I am passionate about. I mean, hell, I've got an Assassin's Creed chair. Like, Who needs that? I like this franchise. I want it to be successful. But when I see stuff like this, where they have 8 games that are all totally different from each other in development all at the same time, mostly from teams that have never put out a game by themselves, I start to get a little worried that they aren't trying to just go back to their roots and try to do something that fans are going to love. They're just throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks. But I'm going to wrap it up there. I've been rambling a while, and I can always tell when the videos are getting long because this room starts to really heat up and I start to lose my voice. So I'm going to call it there. Thanks for watching. Thanks for chilling with me. Come over to Luke Stevens Live again. If you want to hang out with me, just search Luke Stevens Live and I'll pop up. I'm streaming when this video goes up, so come by and say hi. Be like, hey, I just saw the Assassin's Creed video, and I'll be like, oh cool dude, that's awesome, what's your favorite color? And like we'll go from there. It'll be awesome. But that's it for me. Thanks for watching. Much love to everybody who likes the videos and subscribes and rings the bell. It really does make a difference, and I really do appreciate you. I'll see you over on Luke Stevens Live. Much love. Bye bye.